Welcome back to the deep dive. We are jumping into some source material today that really forces us to reconsider, well, everything, the nature of divine power, ownership, even reality itself.
That's right. We're looking at a pretty massive theological paradox here, rooted in how the first God and the second God relate.
Yeah, it's about the second God's decision, and the sources frame it as a kind of almost structural necessity.
Exactly, a necessity within this divine framework. Here you have the second God, who is fundamental to creation, co-eternal, deciding to voluntarily go through this incredible process: self-limitation, obedience, even death.
And the goal, the stated goal, is to inherit creation, specifically space-time, or Faries, as the sources put it.
Precisely, and that's the core conundrum, isn't it?
It really is. Why would a being who seems to be the ultimate source, the definition of existence, need to go through this huge act of self-emptying kenosis, right?
Right, kenosis.
Why do that just to get a better title over something he already seems to possess? It feels, I don't know, almost like divine bureaucracy, but with incredibly high stakes.
It does feel that way, but according to this theological viewpoint, it's absolutely essential. So our mission today is to really dissect that mechanism, why become a creature.
Yeah, how did that fulfill some kind of, legal requirement?
Exactly. And what authority, what absolute power was granted afterwards. We'll be referencing key texts, Hebrews 1.2, Philippians 2, Revelation 1.
Looking for the path to the name outstanding above every name.
That's the one. That's the prize, ultimately.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have to start with the inheritance itself. What is space-time in this context? Because when we hear space-time now, we think Einstein, physics, dimensions.
Right, general relativity, the fabric of the cosmos.
But these ancient sources, when they talk about Gree, it feels like something much, much bigger. Is that right?
Absolutely. You've hit it exactly. Here isn't just the physical coordinates we navigate. It's the entire domain of created existence.
The whole kit and caboodle.
Pretty much. Physical laws, yes, but also spiritual hierarchies, angels, authorities, time itself, all boundaries, basically. Every reality that isn't inherently divine operating within those rules.
And the sources are really clear that this whole domain, this it's fundamentally subordinate to the first God.
Oh, completely. John 10.29 is key there. It just flat out states the Father, the first God, is greater than all.
Implying total transcendence.
Yes. He's not contained by space-time. Space-time is contained sort of within him. He's the ultimate source, totally unconstrained by the creation.
Okay, so if he's the source, the container, how does he govern it? How is his authority actually, put into practice within Jew?
Well, sovereignty is asserted through his presence, but crucially, through his name. Ezra 6.12 highlights this idea. The first God governed space-time by placing his name there.
His name, like a seal or a flag planted.
Kind of like that, yeah. It acts as the ultimate sign of ownership, the administrative control center for the whole creation. So to rule space-time, fundamentally, you need the authority that's vested in that name.
Right. Now, here's where it starts getting complicated. Because we know the second God's initial role wasn't passive. He wasn't just in creation. He was the agent of creation.
Correct. Hebrews 1.2 couldn't be clearer. The second God is the agent through whom all worlds, all go were made. He's the divine architect, the engineer.
On Colossians. Wow. Colossians takes that idea and just blows it up.
Oh, absolutely. Colossians 1.16 is probably the most sweeping statement we have on his creative role. This is all things visible, invisible, doesn't matter. Thrones, dominions, rulers, authorities.
All hierarchies.
All of them. Created through him and for him, which establishes him as prior to all creation, Shuya.
So he's the designer, the builder, and the ultimate reason for it all, the beneficiary.
Exactly. And it doesn't stop there. His function isn't just historical. He built it and walked away. Colossians 1.17 adds the sustaining part. All things hold together in him.
He's the cosmic glue.
That's a great way to put it. He's the ongoing foundation. The reason the whole structure of space-time doesn't just, dissolve into nothing from one moment to the next.
Okay, but this just makes the whole inheritance thing even more baffling. If he designed it, built it, sustains it, surely the authority is inherently his. What legal loophole are the sources saying exist that needs this massive workaround?
This is where we have to shift perspective a bit. Think less about inherent divine nature, his essence, and more about, let's say, legal title, covenant authority within the created domain.
So it's like a difference between being the inventor and holding the specific patent title.
That's getting closer. He possesses divine co-ownership by his very nature, sure, but he doesn't possess the specific superior title, the one that's granted through creaturely obedience and fulfilling a specific covenant.
Ah, okay. So what does this inheritance actually give him then? If it's not the raw materials or the basic ownership, what's the actual prize?
The prize is the name, and the name represents supreme operational authority. Inheriting space-time means inheriting the name outstanding above every name. Philippians 2.9 says, the first God gave him this name, but crucially, after the whole process was complete.
Okay, let's try that analogy again. He's the co-founder, the chief architect of this massive cosmic corporation. He has the essential power, the blueprints. But this inheritance gives him a unique title, like Chairman Emeritus and sole executor of the universe.
That's a really good way to frame the distinction, actually. He has the architectural plans, his inherent divinity, but the name gives him the absolute, unparalleled administrative right over that whole domain.
The final say.
The final say, and all authority over space-time, Gilligo. The sources explicitly connect this acquired authority to the full operational power of the Godhead within creation's context. Think about the Great Commission, Matthew 28.19. He acquires the right to wield the unified name, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit for running and ultimately judging space-time. But, and this is key, he acquires it as the obedient creature who fulfilled the mission.
Wow. So it's an upgrade from an intrinsic shared divine power to this supreme, earned, universally recognized sovereign title, and it can only be earned through this specific covenant fulfillment that only he could do.
It solidifies his status, from co-owner in essence to the final supreme sovereign administrator and inheritor of the created realm. And making that shift possible, well, that required a mechanism of, believe it or not, relinquishment first. Okay, so the core issue, like we said, is this hurdle. The second God already co-owns space-time. Colossians 1.1c and Hebrews 1.10 are clear. If the first God wants to grant him the superior title, there needs to be legal space for that transaction to actually mean something.
And that's the part I find so jarring. Is this suggesting the creator is somehow bound by legal rules within his own creation? Doesn't that kind of diminish the first God's total freedom if he has to play by these rules?
That's a fair question, but the sources frame it differently, not as diminishing him, but as demonstrating his profound integrity, his commitment to the order he established. The premise is that creation already belongs entirely to the divine, right? Psalm 50, Psalm 102 touch on this.
Right. The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof.
Exactly. So the principle seems to be you can't really inherit in a formal rewarded sense what's already yours by right, for the grant of the superior name to be a true inheritance, a reward for an action. The second God first had to functionally or legally vacate his existing co-owner status, at least over the parts of creation destined to change or pass away.
So he had to functionally step back from the existing title, make room, legally speaking, for the first God to grant him a new, superior one. It really does sound like a massive cosmic corporate restructuring.
The analogy holds up surprisingly well. Think about Hebrews 1.10. It talks about how the heavens and earth were made by the second God, but they will perish.
Okay.
So to inherit the new perfected authority over a structure that includes elements heading for obsolescence, he first has to symbolically surrender the old claim tied to that temporary order. This act of relinquishment creates the legal basis for the first God to then highly exalt him and grant the superior name. It becomes a reward truly earned through obedience, not just claimed by his intrinsic divine right.
Which brings us right to the heart of it. Kenosis. Self-emptying. Philippians 2.7 says he had to empty himself, and become a creature. How do we even begin to define emptying himself without implying he somehow stopped being God? Because the sources don't say that.
No, they're very careful, and this is probably the most critical distinction to grasp. Philippians 2.6 makes it clear. He is fundamentally God, Figi. He possesses the very essence of divinity. The emptying isn't a loss of who he is, it's a voluntary giving up of prerogative.
Prerogative, like his rights and privileges.
Exactly. The functional rights, the privileges, the constant outward assertion of his equality with the first God within the created realm. He chose not to treat that equality as something to be, grasped or held on to tightly, 2.6. Instead, he set aside the free exercise of his divine operational power within the domain of space-time.
So, he kept his divine nature, his core identity, but he voluntarily shelved the rights and powers that went with it. He became a divine being operating under the rules of the game, under creaturely constraints.
Precisely. And this involved taking the very nature of a servant, and being made in human likeness. The nature of a servant implies submission, limits, being subject to the laws of space-time, hunger, thirst, tiredness, eventually death. This status fulfills that necessary prerequisite for receiving the inheritance. He has to successfully complete the mission as a creature who is perfectly obedient to the first God.
Which is essential for the whole legal framework. He can't fulfill a creaturely covenant if kisses. He's still operating outside the rules of creaturely existence. He had to get inside the box he built.
Right. And stepping inside that box had this profound consequence for the creatures already in it. Think about the role of a creature in space-time. By definition, they exist only within it, subject to time, change, decay, death.
And historically, that created a massive barrier.
Yeah.
The infinite creator and the finite creature was a dangerous interface.
Absolutely. The sources consistently remind us that before this happened, creatures simply couldn't see God directly and live. Exodus 33 is the classic example. The sheer infinite presence of the uncreated was fundamentally incompatible with the limited temporal reality of the creature. A hard barrier existed.
But the kenosis, the self-emptying and becoming a creature, it smashes that barrier. By the second God taking on creaturely form, the rules of engagement change completely for everyone else.
They really do. Look at 1 John 1.1. It talks about the eternal life, the divine word, becoming something that could be heard, seen with eyes, looked at, even touched with hands.
The infinite made tangible.
Exactly. By becoming a creature, the inaccessible becomes accessible. The divine, constrained voluntarily by creaturely limits, allows humanity, allows creatures to actually survive the encounter. John 14.8 illustrates it perfectly. Philip says, "Show us the Father," and Jesus replies, "Anyone who has seen me has seen the Father." Seeing the Son as a creature allows other creatures to encounter the previously unapproachable Father. This whole act, becoming a creature, was like the necessary bridge built from the divine side across that gulf.
And it transforms the whole dynamic. He enters the limitations of time and matter, not because he lacked power, but because he chose the only path, according to these sources, the only legal and covenantal route to acquire that superior earned title over the creation he already made and sustains.
Now, to fulfill that creaturely mandate, to complete the whole legal transaction, his self-emptying had to take on a very specific form. It wasn't just any creature. The sources are quite insistent that the decision included the second God becoming Adam Hono.
Adam specifically. Why Adam? Why not, I don't know, an angel or just a generic, perfect human form?
Yeah.
Why step into that specific identity?
Because he had to step into the role of the one who was supposed to be the original steward, the legal representative of the created world. The first Adam, through disobedience, essentially forfeited that stewardship, lost the keys, if you like. The second God becomes the new perfect Adam to regain that inheritance, not just for himself, but representatively for creation. This identity as the rightful heir is absolutely crucial for what comes next.
And this connects directly to that parable you mentioned earlier, the one about the wicked tenants in Luke 20.
Exactly. The sources seem to use this parable to underscore how his status was recognized, even by his enemies. The vineyard owner sends his son, thinking, maybe they'll respect him, the heir and obey.
But they don't.
No, quite the opposite. The tenants immediately recognize his claim. This is the heir, let's kill him, and the inheritance will be ours. So, by becoming Adam, the second God isn't just taking on a human form, he's actively asserting the claim of the rightful ultimate owner. And that provokes the crisis. It forces the hand of the current rebellious tenants. You could see them as the opposing powers and authorities who try to seize the title for themselves by eliminating the heir.
So the attempt to kill him, far from stopping the inheritance, actually confirms he is the heir and sets in motion the very mechanism for him acquiring the superior title. But getting that title required, well, total obedience, not just showing up.
Absolutely. The inheritance isn't just awarded for being a creature. It's awarded for submitting completely to the first God's will, even when that submission leads to the ultimate letting go the loss of life itself. That obedience had to be absolute, extending unto death, as Philippians 2.8 puts it.
And the sources are incredibly specific about the method of death. It wasn't just any death. Why the cross? Why death on the cross came in Juno. That specific detail seems important.
It really does. The cross, in that context, represented the absolute depth of creaturely humiliation, suffering, and powerlessness. It was public shame, excruciating pain, and complete submission to the hostile forces operating within space-time. It was the total inversion of his original divine power and status described in Colossians 1.
The Creator subjected to the worst the creation could inflict.
Precisely. By willingly submitting to that, he fully completed the terms of the creaturely covenant. He perfectly fulfilled the role of the obedient Adam. This act legally sealed the relinquishment of Golf, his old co-owner claim tied to the potentially perishable creation, and simultaneously established an unshakable new claim based entirely on perfect, voluntary, creaturely obedience right through the worst possible outcome.
It's the ultimate act of divine humility, entering the realm of the curse, of mortality itself, to legally terminate his creaturely state under the old, failed Adamic regime, thereby clearing the way for the new.
And that's why the sources explicitly state he receives the inheritance through the cross, iondu. The cross isn't just a symbol of suffering, it's presented as the cosmic legal transaction point. It's the final signature on the surrender of old claim document, which simultaneously acts as the deed of acquisition for the new, superior title.
Okay, so what exactly does this supreme act acquire for him? You mentioned 3 specific things earlier that are inherited through the cross.
Yes. According to this framework, the cross is the mechanism through which he receives. First, absolute and total authority over space-time itself, the very creation he entered, perfectly obeyed within, and conquered even in death. Second, the name outstanding above every name, the ultimate title of authority.
And third,
the throne, which symbolizes his total sovereignty and his right to judge the cosmos.
so the death isn't a tragedy that God somehow salvaged. In this view, it's the absolute climax of the legal procedure. He trades his inherent, but in some sense functionally incomplete, title for a superior, earned one that comes with unparalleled administrative power.
And this unbelievable act triggers the divine response. Because of this profound self-lowering, because of this perfect obedience unto death, the first God highly exalted him and gave him the name outstanding above every name. That's Philippians 2.9 again. This is the formal granting of the inheritance, the ultimate reward for the mission, perfectly executed.
And the scope of this new status, this new name, it's not just local, it's not just for humanity or Earth. It commands universal recognition from every corner of Yusuf.
Absolutely. The very next verses in Philippians 10 and 11 declare the consequence. Every knee must bow in heaven, on earth, and under the earth, and every tongue must confess his lordship. This authority explicitly covers the angelic heavens, the human world, and the realm of the dead, the underworld.
Total coverage.
Total coverage. This universal submission is the cosmic ratification of his new status. He is the supreme inheritor, the Lord, the sovereign administrator of the entire universe. The authority he earned through this incredibly costly creaturely journey now commands all creation, visible and invisible, to acknowledge his rule.
It's the complete transformation, from co-creator to the final, absolute judging king.
Right.
And paradoxically, it was all achieved through that moment of ultimate temporary powerlessness on the cross.
So,
Right, so now we get to the payoff, the glorious result. What does this inherited power actually look like in practice? The second God, after resurrection, he basically confirms the transfer is complete, right? With a pretty definitive statement.
oh, absolutely definitive. The declaration in Matthew 28.18 leaves no room for doubt. All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. The sheer breadth of that all authority, covering both the heavenly realms, spiritual, angelic, and the earthly, physical, temporal, it just confirms how comprehensive this new name, this inherited status really is.
So he now controls the entire spectrum, from the highest spiritual plane right down to the mechanisms of life and death on earth. And the sources seem to link this authority directly to the name he received.
Yes, the name embodies the authority, and perhaps the best way to visualize the sheer magnitude of this shift, the power he now wields, is through that description of the inheritor in his glorified state. The sources point us to Revelation chapter 1, verses 13 to 16. It's really crucial for understanding his post-inheritance identity.
Okay, yeah, that vision John has. He's seen like the Son of Man, so still connected to his time as a creature, his Adam role.
Exactly, retaining that link, that solidarity with the creaturely existence he passed through. But now he's infused with this almost unapproachable divine majesty. It's a terrifyingly glorious image.
Let's break it down. Let's really try and visualize this, connecting each symbol back to the authority he earned through that whole kenosis process. First, the clothes, the robe and the belt.
Okay, he's wearing a long robe described as dragging at his feet, shokia, and he has a gold belt, a sah, across his chest. The long robe that typically symbolizes high priesthood and royalty.
Okay, so judge and king.
And priest. He's now the supreme mediator and the ultimate king. The gold belt signifies wealth, yes, but more importantly, divine power, readiness, maybe divine authority itself. Gold often points to the uncreated realm. So he's earned the right to mediate for creation and to rule over it all at once.
Okay, they're the descriptions of his
Yeah.
age, his wisdom, the hair.
Right. His head and his hair are described as white, like wool, or like snow brazier.
Yeah.
This immediately echoes the Ancient of Days imagery from the Book of Daniel.
Symbolizing eternity.
Eternity, yes, but also supreme judicial authority. He existed before time, but crucially, through his perfect obedience within time, he now has the right to sit as the ultimate judge over the temporal realm he entered.
And the eyes. Eyes are often about seeing, knowing. His are like fire.
Eyes like fire, oh no, that speaks of perfect penetrating knowledge, insight that sees right through everything, and judgment based on that perfect sight. He sees it all, past, present, future, simultaneously. And maybe even more importantly, having lived as a creature, he doesn't just see external actions. He sees internal motives. He understands the pressures, the temptations. That gives his judgment an unparalleled weight, an undeniable legitimacy.
Okay. His feet sometimes overlooked, but here they seem really solid, like bronze.
Yes, feet like polished bronze refined in a furnace. No, bronze in Scripture is often linked with judgment, but also enduring strength. It suggests the foundation of his rule is utterly solid, unshakable, and maybe refined in a furnace points back to the fiery test of suffering and death he endured.
Right, his authority was forged in that fire.
Exactly. It's rock solid because it was tested under the absolute worst conditions space-time could throw at him.
And his voice.
Yeah.
Not just speaking, but like roaring water.
The sound of his voice is like the roar of many waters, and the Adonis. It's overwhelming, majestic, impossible to ignore or contain. It signifies uncontainable power, the ultimate decree. When he speaks now, with this inherited authority, the entirety of space-time effectively has to listen. It's the voice of the one who earned the absolute right to dictate reality.
Wow. Okay, then the things he's holding, or that come from him, the stars, the sword, his face.
Right, the active symbols of his administration. The 7 stars in his right hand, often interpreted as representing the messengers or leaders of his community on Earth. Holding them shows his absolute control and guidance over his earthly administration.
He's in charge.
Completely. Then the sharp, two-edged sword coming from his mouth. That's the power of his word. It's judgment, yes, but also creative and executing power. His decrees cut through all resistance, all pretense.
And finally, his face, like the sun.
His face shining like the sun at its full strength, Arsadan. Just unapproachable, overwhelming, transcendent glory. The glory he had before, perhaps, but now revealed as the one who conquered deepest darkness, the darkness of the grave itself.
So this whole picture, this terrifying, glorious vision, it's the functional reality of the inherited name. It's the visual proof that the whole costly, paradoxical maneuver worked. He now has absolute sovereignty, and the absolute peak of that authority seems to be his possession of certain keys.
Yes. He declares himself right after John sees this vision and falls down like dead. He says, "Don't be afraid. I am the first and the last. I am the living one. I was dead, and behold, I am alive forever and ever." And then the crucial part. "And I hold the keys of death and Hades." This one.
Revelation 1:17-18.
Holding the keys to death and Hades. What does that actually mean? Does it mean he controls who dies? Or are death and Hades now like entities that report to him? It's maybe even stronger than that. They are more than just subservient. They are his possessions. He has them under lock and key. Death, physical mortality, and Hades, the realm of the dead, the consequence of sin within space-time. These represent the ultimate limitations imposed on creatures within this current order.
The final enemies.
Exactly. By holding the keys, the second god demonstrates he's no longer subject to them. He entered their domain and came back out victorious. Now they are subject to him. They become instruments under his sovereign control to be disposed of according to his ultimate will and plan. Revelation 2.23 hints at this power. He searches minds and hearts and repays according to deeds, implying control over final outcomes.
So it completely neutralizes the ultimate threat that hangs over every creature. He went into the heart of mortality, the condition he voluntarily took on, and he mastered it from the inside.
That's the implication, yes. And the ultimate fate of these entities, death and Hades, confirms their now subordinate temporary status. The sources, particularly Revelation 20.14 and Writ, reveal the endgame. After sin is dealt with completely, after the mission of this current space-time order is finished, the second god will exercise his supreme authority by taking death and Hades and casting them into the lake of fire, which the text explicitly defines as the second death Donwin.
So mortality itself and the state of being under sin's consequence, they aren't eternal realities in this framework. They are temporary problems, elements within space-time that fall into the second god's inherited jurisdiction, and they're ultimately destined for complete removal, for destruction. That really underscores the immense power contained in that superior name he inherited.
Okay, so now we need to address maybe the ultimate resolution of the paradox. We've tracked the journey. The second God enters space-time as a creature, specifically as Adam dies, is resurrected. But what is his state now after the resurrection? And how does he manage the universe with this newly confirmed authority?
Well, he died as Adam, the human representative. But you mentioned Luke 20.35 earlier, which describes the resurrected state as being angel-like okoe. That sounds like a new kind of existence, maybe perfected creaturely existence, but definitely beyond normal human limits.
Right, and this point needs some careful handling. While Luke uses that term angel-like, perhaps to describe the immortality and power of the resurrected state, the broader testimony of the sources seems to emphasize that the second God is ultimately neither just Adam nor just an angel.
He's something else entirely.
He transcends both categories. He appears within space-time, often still using the title Son of Man, maintaining that connection, but fundamentally, he transcends space-time altogether, Ugoyan. Colossians 3.11 hints at this, where Christ is all and is in all, suggesting a reality beyond the old categories. The creaturely form served its specific, crucial purpose, fulfilling the legal requirement for the inheritance. But his essential being remains defined by the infinite, not the finite.
So the resurrected body, the form he appears in, it's like a new kind of interface. Something capable of interacting within space-time, being seen, heard, touched, but simultaneously not bound by its limitations, able to transcend it.
That seems to be the implication. And that transcendence is absolutely necessary for his ongoing role as sustainer. Remember Colossians 1.17, all things hold together in him. To do that, the second God must be somehow simultaneously present in all moments and all places. Chana, which is, it completely breaks our normal understanding of space and time. We're stuck here now. One linear moment, one location. He's operating across everything, all at once. It goes beyond just being everywhere, like an ambient presence. The sources imply an active moment-by-moment sustaining. He is the one who simultaneously sustains the existence of all moments and all places. Hirio Sogar. Without his continuous active upholding, the whole fabric would unravel. Colossians 1.17 has to be understood in this incredibly dynamic way. Things hold together in him because he is actively maintaining their reality at every single coordinate of space-time, constantly.
Which brings us back to that mind-bending idea.
Yeah.
The ultimate spatial reality is that creation, space-time itself, exists within the second God. He's the container.
He is the infinite vessel, yes. He isn't defined or limited by space-time. Space-time is defined and maintained by him within him. The entire creation is just a subset of his greater reality. And maybe that is the profound resolution of the inheritance story. He entered the subset creation temporarily, subjected himself to its rules to earn the superior title over it, but he always remained and now fully operates as the superset, the divine reality that contains the whole thing.
Okay. This inevitably leads us to the edge of what we can comprehend. So what does all this incredible paradox, this cosmic legal drama, this concept of him containing space-time, what does it all mean for us? For creatures like you and me, bound by the very space-time he entered, inherited, and now transcends?
Well, the sources themselves seem to conclude with a sense of profound humility on this point. We're essentially trying to measure the infinite with our very finite, dimensionally limited ruler. Job 11.7 puts it sparkly, doesn't it?
Can you fathom the mysteries of God? Can you probe the limits of the Almighty?
Implying the answer is no.
Pretty much. Creatures who exist only within space-time simply cannot fully comprehend what it means for the second God to be both the inheritor of space-time and simultaneously the container and sustainer of space-time. Our minds, our very consciousness, are shaped by the rules of the house. It's incredibly difficult, maybe impossible, to fully grasp the nature of the architect who not only built the house, but now, in some sense, is the house, or at least contains it. So our knowledge of him, especially in this ultimate transcendent state, is entirely dependent on what he chooses to show us. We can't figure it out from the inside looking out.
That seems to be the conclusion. Matthew 11.25, John 3.27, they both emphasize that this kind of knowledge isn't achieved through human effort or deduction alone. It comes through revelation, granted according to his sovereign will. We have to receive it, we can't just grasp it.
Which makes his final declaration in Revelation 22.13, I am the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last, the beginning and the end, feel like the ultimate summary statement. It sort of closes the loop on this incredibly complex legal and existential narrative.
It really does. It feels like the declaration that resolves all the preceding complexity: the creation, the need for kenosis, the path through the cross, the inheritance, the exaltation, the sustaining power. All of it is somehow encapsulated in his being the all-encompassing reality, the start and finish of everything within space-time, and presumably beyond it, too. We're presented with the answer, the outcome, even if the full divine calculus required to arrive there remains partly, perhaps necessarily, hidden from our creaturely perspective.
Wow. Okay, this has been an extraordinarily complex deep dive, really forcing us, and hopefully you listening, to shift how we think about divinity, power, law, even existence itself. We started with this huge paradox, the creator needing to inherit his own creation.
And we've traced the path laid out in the sources, the second God's paradoxical decision to essentially functionally surrender his inherent co-ownership rights over the temporal order.
Right, then entering the confined reality of creaturely spacetime, becoming one of us, basically.
Becoming Adam, yes. And then undergoing death specifically. Death on the cross, which fulfilled the creaturely requirement of perfect, absolute obedience to the first God.
And by that unique, unparalleled act, he obtained the reward, the superior name, the absolute authority over all existence.
Including authority over the ultimate powers within that existence, death and Hades themselves.
The sources really show that space and time aren't just neutral backdrops. They are functional properties, subject to divine law and administration. And they were fundamentally redefined, reclaimed perhaps, by this unique act of inheritance. It truly is the ultimate story of earning what was, in a sense, already yours, but earning it in a superior, covenantally validated way that grants greater, permanent, and absolute authority.
And this whole exploration, I think, leaves us with a final thought, a question to maybe ponder on, building directly on the inheritor's acquired authority over death and Hades.
Okay, what's the ponder point for today?
Well, if the very foundations of our current experience of space-time, and specifically the ultimate limitations within it, death and Hades, if these are merely elements, tools, or conditions that the inheritor now holds the keys to and will ultimately discard into the lake of fire, what does that really imply about the ultimate permanence, or maybe even the ultimate importance, of anything that exists solely within those confines? If the container itself, or at least its current rules, are temporary and destined for replacement, what does that say about the value of the contents, especially if considered apart from the inheritor who sustains and transcends it all?
That is a profound question to take away. What is the value of anything confined to a temporary system? Something definitely to think about as you navigate your own reality within this space-time he inherited. That's all for this deep dive.